you guys for joining us today. I am Jenny Taft with Skip Bayless and Shannon Sharp. So, Skip, I start with you. How are you doing today?
Jenny, as we all know, Shannon Sharp is coming to us live from the wine cellar of his palatial estate way up the hill from me here in Bel Air. And we now know also that Tom Brady is renting Derek Jeter's mansion in Tampa, but Shannon has a guest house bigger than Derek Jeter's mansion in Tampa.
No, Shannon does not have a guest house that's bigger than Derek Jeter, because
yes,
I saw a virtual tour of Derek Jeter's house. They call it St. Jetersburg. That's how big that house is. But, I mean, with Skip, but Tom would need something like that. That's what he's accustomed to. Can you imagine Tom Brady? I mean, it sounds like, not to poo-poo, but can you imagine Tom Brady living in 10,000 square feet? I cannot. Unless it's a condo.
He's earned it.
He has.
Oh,
he has.
Shannon, must be nice. Enjoy your space. Let's start by continuing to talk about Tom Brady, because this is a guy who has famously said he wants to play until he is 45. But according to one columnist who said he had a lengthy conversation with Brady, he believes he could play until he's 48 years old. And then just this morning, Tom Brady went on the Howard Stern show, and he was pretty open and honest in the conversation, even admitting that the reason he's no longer attending OTAs is because Gisele wants him to carry more of the load at home, even admitting at times she'd been unhappy at home. So, Shannon, what is your reaction to all of this?
Well, Skip, I was... before we came on, I was reading through some of this transcript of what Tom Brady had said on the Howard Stern, and I was surprised how candid he was and how open and honest that he was and reflective about his time in New England. And I think that has a lot to do. It seems like a burden or a cloud has been lifted off of him. It seems like, Skip, you know, you and I used to talk about it all the time, that when you go to New England, it's almost like the movie Gattaca. Everybody's dressed the same, everybody walks the same, and they look the same. The movie was shot in black and white. And so it seems to me that once Tom Brady got out from under Bill Belichick, there was no repercussions or ramifications for anything that he could have possibly said. He was like, okay, now I can be speaking freely and openly and honestly. Skip, but for me, I think this is one of the reasons why Coach Belichick was so willing to move on. He knew that if he says, okay, Tom, you can play to 43, guess what was going to happen, Skip? Then here come 44, here come 45, here come 46, here come 47. And at some point in time, Coach Belichick knew he was wanting to get on. Now, the one thing that I do want to push back with Tom on is that he's like, well, it was Coach Belichick's decision. He knew that, you know, eventually he was going to have to go in a different direction. No, Tom. You fought tooth and nail at the time when you were there, because you went upstairs and talked to Mr. Kraft, because had you not done that, you would have been gone a couple of years before you actually left in 2020. So I'm going to give a little pushback there, Skip, but I'm not surprised. There's zero, to answer your question, Jenny, there's a 0% chance that Tom Brady is going to be playing in the National Football League at the age of 48. Now, he's, I think the oldest, Vinny Testaverde, I think, started 7 games at the age of 44. I think Warren Moon, started a few games at the age of 44. But Tom Brady, talking about being a full-time starter, he needs to get past 43. He needs to play his 21st season and see how that turns out and reassess it after that. And that was one of the things I think, Skip, started bothering Coach Belichick, because he wants his players to think in 1-year increments, not 2, 3, 4 years down the road. And I think he thought Tom was getting ahead of himself and wasn't so much focusing on year to year, but he was looking too far into the future. And that maybe rubbed Coach Belichick the wrong way.
Okay, I have a whole lot to say about everything you just said, but I'm going to go back to your pushback that no, Tom, you went upstairs to Daddy, to Mr. Kraft. This is 2.5 years ago, to say, wait a second, he's trying to push me out the back door. He wants to go forward with Jimmy Garoppolo. And obviously we know that it was Robert Kraft, according to the ESPN report, who pushed back on Belichick and said, no, you will trade Jimmy G. and we know the rest of that story.
Correct.
But I ask you, Shannon, before I launch into all the
Yes.
rest that you said, did not Robert Kraft make the right choice 2.5 years ago to overrule Belichick then to keep Tom Brady? Did he not make the right choice?
Yes, Skip, it was the right choice, but that wasn't what Tom said. Tom said he was okay with Coach Belichick wanting to move on, when you and I both know he was not okay, and he still isn't okay with Coach Belichick moving on. He also said some other things that he said in the article. You might touch on it, and then I'll come back if you don't. But go ahead, Skip. I want to hear what you have to say about this one.
Okay, so the point was Robert Kraft made not a good decision, a great decision to overrule Belichick and basically slap him on the wrist and say, no, you trade your young quarterback that you're now grooming to replace Tom Brady. And basically Belichick gave Jimmy G away for a second-round pick to Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco. But the point was that from that point forward, Tom Brady took them to that Super Bowl that was upcoming, threw for a playoff record 505, put up 33 points, and it still wasn't enough to overcome Belichick's lack of defense that day as he benched Malcolm Butler, and they lost 41-33. Then the following year, they go back to the Super Bowl and obviously beat the Los Angeles Rams in that Super Bowl. So that's 2 Super Bowls that Kraft got out of that one decision. But I do agree with your assessment of Tom's quotes on Howard Stern this morning, because I was a little surprised. I thought he would be a little more honest, a little more painfully honest, a little more openly honest about the decay of his relationship with Bill Belichick. And from what I read of the transcript, like you, I haven't heard the full expanse of the interview. I heard snippets of it, but it sounded like Tom was taking the high road. In fact, the snippets of conversation I heard sounded like he was having a hard time even talking about it because he was being so careful. He was almost halting. He was stuttering a lot. Well, I was that kind of conversation from Tom Brady, which I rarely hear from him, because he was trying to be so careful as to not get trapped by the great Howard Stern, who's one of the great interviewers in the history of radio or television.
He is.
Into saying something that he would regret. So to me, most of the conversation was Tom ducking and dodging and trying to say the right things about Coach Belichick, when you and I agree that that relationship had completely soured to the point of divorce. Now, back to Gisele. I had read, it's basically like People magazine sort of speculation over the last 4 years that their marriage getting a little rocky. We may even go back 5 or 6 years ago. And Tom's best quotes on Howard Stern were about how, she wrote me a letter about how much trouble our marriage was in. And I had to really focus on how to try to carry more of the load at home. That was the quote on Howard Stern. Well, the only way he knew to do that was cut out some of his football. So he cut out the OTAs, which are the off-season training programs that, most teams barely go through. That's not cutting out a whole lot of football, but maybe that was enough to A, save the marriage, and B, make it where they were coexisting, because it seems like in the last couple of years, Gisele has made some more peace with the fact that Tom basically has a, quote, mistress, and that's football. That he's going to spend as much time with his mistress of football as he does with her and the kids in his real marriage. So to me, it sounds like Tom has gotten it to a place where it's at least barely workable, where he can now tell Ian O'Connor of ESPN, I'm actually thinking about going beyond 45, and Ian is just sort of speculating, gut feeling, that Tom could go until he's 48 years of age. Well, Shannon, I've told you from the start of Undisputed, which was going on 4 years ago, this guy is going to shatter the mold. Age is just a number to him, that in the end, he's having so much fun playing football, and he's in such good health shape, and his body is still so fresh that I believe he can play until you say he's got 0% chance, but I remind you, you've been the guy all along who said 2016 will be his last year. 2017 said Shannon Sharp last year. 2018 will be his last year.
Hold on, Skip. Here's the thing, though. I would have been correct. I said it was going to be his last year in New England. Had he not gone upstairs to Mr. Kraft, would 2017 not been his last year?
Okay, but you were saying it's going to be his last year of football. Only until last year, which was 2019, did you give yourself the out of, no, I'm now saying it's going to be his last year in New England. But early on, the first 3 years, you were saying he's going to have to retire from football because he's going to hit the proverbial football wall.
He's played better, but Skip, knowing Coach Belichick and knowing how he is a football lifer, he knows what it's like to have a historically great quarterback and you don't have the bridge to the future. What happens to you? Miami is still looking for that bridge for Dan Marino. And Buffalo might have just found it with with Allen for Jim Kelly. But Skip, you know, if you have a historically great quarterback and you do not have a bridge, because everybody doesn't get Joe Montana, go to Steve Young. Everyone doesn't get 17 years of Brett Favre and go right to Aaron Rodgers. Coach Belichick believed that he had a rightful successor. And also, Skip, another thing, if you're having problems at home because your wife says, I need you to help more with the